afternoon, everyone. So, got a very informational webinar today with Keyrenter, a Denver-based property management group. So we can talk about a lot of the new laws that have come through Colorado in 23 and 2024. So we're going to officially kick off here in about 1 or 2 minutes. But I know we got a lot of people rolling in and live. If a couple of people could just type in the chat box, make sure you hear me. I want to make sure you can hear us, and also want to make sure the chat box is working because I love questions. So let me know if you have any properties in Denver and if you're a self-managing landlord or use a property manager. All right. I see lots of people posting back. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for doing that. Now, stay tuned. Stay close to your keyboard. We like to keep these interactive is the word I was looking for. So as we go through and we talk about topics here, I want you to ask questions to clarify. Whenever I get an expert in the studio, like our expert today with Keyrenter, my motto is to use him and abuse him. He is an expert. He knows knowledge. So let's use his knowledge. Cool. I see lots of people. Lots of self-managers. This is awesome. All right. So we'll officially kick things off. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We are at the end of July here, and we have Keyrenter, a Denver-based property management group, and today's presentation is going to be discussing how to navigate the changing landlord-tenant legislation. In 23 and 24, a lot of laws have passed. And it's super important for every landlord to know what's going on here because a lot has changed. But also in the past, a lot of times, a lot of these laws kind of excluded the small guy, the small landlords, the people like us on the webinar here. But now they apply to everyone. And there are some really big penalties and some really big consequences if you don't follow the law and follow the rules. So we're going to go through all the details on here to make sure you're aware of them. And with that all said, we have to give you a disclaimer here, the legal disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. Brandon's not a lawyer. We are simply going through and sharing information that we know and talking about how Brandon's implementing to his property management group. And then always go out there and read the laws yourself, talk to a lawyer, or talk to your property manager. All right. So I'm really excited to have Brandon Schulten, who is the founder and CEO of Keyrenter in Denver. Good afternoon, Brandon.
Good afternoon.
So we met a couple of years ago, Brandon and I did, and I've always had a lot of respect for him, and we had a good relationship because first off, I think property management is one of the hardest and most underappreciated businesses in general. So thank you first off for doing what you want, for doing what you do with property management. But what I've liked about you is you're a landlord yourself. You've owned rentals, so you know the headaches and the upside of rentals, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But also, I've really respected, as another small business owner, your approach to growing Keyrenter and your approach towards scaling a business from hey, you want to go out there and hit certain points to scale in the business to provide great services to the landlords, great services to the residents of your properties and your landlord's properties. And a lot of times in property management, it's very hard for a property manager to go out there and scale the business. And I feel like you have. I've always enjoyed our chats, randomly here and there about the growing pains I'm having, the growing pains you're going through. And I love the approach you have with Keyrenter because I think there's very few property managers that can provide a great service to both the landlords and the residents, while also scaling the business. And you got a nice picture here of the Keyrenter team. I don't even know, how big is your team now, Keyrenter? How many doors do you have, and how big is your team now?
Yeah, we're at about 950 doors, and I think we have 41 employees.
Wow, that is bigger than the last time we talked, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So as you can see here, that is one of the great things about Brandon and his approach is he is, focusing on also building the business, and having that scale is really important to be able to service the clients. And also this brings us to another point. This is kind of one of my crystal ball theories on the new landlord legislation coming out, is it's going to really favor the big landlords out there, the people with, hundreds and thousands of multifamily units and the bigger property management companies, because I've read through some of these laws. I've talked to a lot of people associated, with, interpreting these laws and giving me feedback. And I have a lot of, like, off the record, happy hours and lunches, and they are incredibly difficult to comply with. I think it's going to do a disservice to the small landlords, like a lot of people on the webinar today, and make it incredibly difficult. So I think it's going to be for the companies that have the ability to go out there and read all the laws, have the legal counsel, stay on top of it, and be able to track everything. And that's a big reason why I'm glad to have you on the webinar and glad to have you come share everything with our members. And with that said, I've noticed a couple trends here. Some landlords are saying, hey, I've been in the market for a while. I'm not happy with the legislation. I'm tapping out. The bigger trend I'm seeing is a lot of self-managing landlords are saying, hey, with all the complexity of what's going on here, they're turning over the keys to property management. And I think that is prudent for everyone to consider about it. Once you go through this webinar, really take a look at, what the downside is if you don't follow a law, and really consider the upside of you self-managing. Yes, you're saving some money, but I think you're opening yourself to a lot more liability and headache. And this is something I asked you to put together, Brandon, was you're put together a special deal for people watching the webinar to do a free rental analysis and a few other things. Can you tell us what you're offering for prospective landlords out there?
Yeah, for sure. So often a question people come with is just like, what does my property rent for? So we can do a market analysis if that's relevant for where you're at. We'll also do a portfolio analysis. So we have some cool tools to look at some different rates of return and project things into the future and look at that as a whole for the portfolio. So happy to do that. Look for maybe some areas where things are underperforming or there's tweaks that could be made there. And we'll give a free first month of management if anybody wants to try out the service.
And I think a lot of, the people that know me, I do a lot of portfolio analyses, and the most common mistake I see landlords make is their property is a couple $100 below market rent. And this is just based off, what I know, or running a rentometer report. So that free rental analysis, that is worth it for every single landlord out there. At the very least, come get a professional's opinion as to what your property would rent for. All right, Brandon, I'm sliding the keyboard over to you.
All right.
So you can walk us through what is going on with all the legislation, plus some tips so people can navigate it and also increase revenue.
Absolutely. So I heard that it was a record year in 2024 for both bills proposed and bills passed related to housing through the Colorado legislature. I took the time to compile the data for the last 4 years here, or 5 years, I guess. So you can see that it's been a trend heading up since 2021. So yeah, the lower line here is bills passed. So it was 25 housing related bills to navigate just this year. So yeah, what is covered in a housing bill? I just wanted to clarify that, because not every single one is like tenants' rights or whatever, but some different things you'll see. Tenants' rights, we'll go over some of those. So discrimination, screening practices, eviction processes, a lot of the, protecting the tenant from the big bad landlord, limiting of fees charged, requirements for repairs. Some of these bills are just allocating funding. So that can be for studies. There's some on affordable housing, historic structures, that kind of thing, some funding for ADUs. We'll touch on that late in the webinar. Some cover HOAs. So collection policies, that's a big one. If any of you are involved with HOAs, now you're having to go update your collection policies to change the timelines on things to be compliant, that kind of thing. How HOAs can foreclose, regulation of managers. Some of these relate to zoning. So again, ADUs was a big one this year. Occupancy limits.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So a lot that can be covered under housing, but these are some of the topics we've seen this year and in previous years.
So out of all these are 25 bills encompassing these 4 categories.
Yep.
All right.
How do I get to the next one?
Uh-oh.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
So I wanted to start with 2023. A lot of these things, they come out, and even sometimes I've seen everybody's freaking out. And then when you look back a year later, you're like, that did not have the impact we thought it was going to have, or there's some little loophole that just changed everything. So I thought it'd be worth, at least probably a lot of you have, looked at some of this stuff in the past from 2023, but let's just go back and see kind of what's been the impact at this point. So some of the bills we'll cover, I'll go over here. I wanted to touch on this one really quick because I didn't produce a slide for it. So, but you have to disclose radon now to tenants. So go make sure you get the form. There's an official form on that. Just use the form provided and make sure you're telling them what you know, and it has a
Is it kind of like the lead-based paint disclosure?
Exactly.
So it's like whatever you know is what you're sharing.
Yep.
So it doesn't require
functions
to
very
get
similar.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, there's no requirement to go back and get a test, but so many real estate transactions you do test, right? So if you've bought your rental property in the recent past, like you probably have a test, and then there is an obligation to share what that had.
So this is part of like when people are signing the lease or during the lease up phase?
Yep. It has to be done kind of at the time of lease signing.
Where do people find the disclosure form? Is this on Dora's website?
Yeah. So Dora put this out. So just probably a Google search of like Colorado radon disclosure rentals or something like that will get you to that.
Okay.
So for this year, we're going to cover some of the big ones. Again, we're not going to cover all 25, but these were some of the ones that stood out. Again, I wanted to touch on this one, House Bill 1451, that hair length is now added to the protected classes. So I forget the acronym for Crown. It's something about a world with natural hair or something like that. So
wait, you're talking about like physical hair?
Yeah. So actual like hair length can't be what you decline a tenant based on. So
I am really curious as to the story behind that. That
Yeah,
is
right.
So got a couple questions here in the chat box. Basically, the summation is, hey, if I don't have a radon test and I don't know, do they have to get a radon test?
Yeah, my understanding is no, there's no requirement to go back and test. It's just like the lead-based paint form. If you filled that out as you signed leases, you just have to say what you know. And so there's an option on there of like, I don't have a report. I don't know.
Okay. So a best thing to do is, take that tip from Brandon and then go to Dora's website or Google the Colorado Disclosure Radon Test or radon information and go read the form and make sure you are in compliance.
Yeah. And this was one like, I don't think attorneys were totally clear on if you have an existing tenant in your property, do you have to like go back and disclose just mid-lease what you know, or is it kind of like with new leases going forward? We ended up deciding to be a little more proactive on it just based on some of our attorney's advice. But all right, so we're going to start with some of these bills from 2023. So this was 1068 on pet protection. And this essentially just limited the pet rent to $35 a month or 1.5% of the monthly rent.
So that's basically pet rent control?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So make sure, and this one was, like this should be done already. It's been in place long enough. Like if you have pet fees right now that exceed that, I would go back and tell your tenant you're going to start charging them less. It also said pet deposits cannot exceed $300. Make sure you're not charging more than that. This also had a provision that applied just to insurance companies that they can't make these breed-based decisions and have, that in the policies that they'll cancel based on certain breeds. So make sure you're aware of that. There may be some insurance companies that aren't complying with that. So there's also some extra protocols required for pets during the eviction process. So if you're in an eviction and you know there's a pet there, I would say that's the action here. Just remember this. You probably don't need to like school yourself on it if you're not dealing with an eviction, but definitely worth going back and reading this if that situation presents itself, because there's some specific requirements about how you need to handle the pet. And I don't know.
So a couple questions on the pets here. Is a pet rent $35 or 1.5%, whichever is higher?
Yeah, whichever is greater.
Okay. Something that stuck out to me this years ago, one of a tip I learned from someone or that this person shared was they don't do a separate pet deposit. Hey, if the security deposit's $1,000, and they say don't add a $500 pet deposit, just make the total security deposit $1,500, because if the pet does more than $500 worth of damage, you can only take from the pet deposit but not the general security deposit. Is that good information, and does that still apply under this rule?
I've always thought the pet deposit was a little silly for that reason, because it does kind of it's a little unclear, like, is that the only amount of money that you could charge for, or if it was pet damage? I think there's probably a good argument that you could take from the regular security deposit, but we've never differentiated it on that. But yeah, if the question is, could we add $500 even though it says 300, but not label it pet deposit? I don't know. I think those are the kinds of things that can get you in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to skirt it by like, well, we didn't call it a pet deposit, but they could look and see a track record of what you charge for deposit. Clearly you added more than $300.
If all your no pet tenants have $1,000 deposit and all your ones with pets have $1,500,
that looks a little
that
fishy,
would, yeah.
Right?
Does this apply to comfort animals?
No.
I assume emotional support animals might
right.
be
No, you can't charge any fees for those or any extra deposit or anything like that.
Okay. And then Christopher G in the comments said, going back to the hair length, crown is due to a lot of people being excluded due to their appearance. Think about schools with dress codes or hairstyles that would, dress codes that exclude ethnic hairstyles.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot more sense on appearance on that side. I was thinking just it clogs the drain, but that was that makes way more sense.
Yeah,
so
no, this is like
out.
in
no that makes because then then you're not discriminating. That makes a lot of sense. So thank you.
All right, so a quick tip here that we just see with a lot of self-managing landlords is that they just herd pets can be hard on a rental or had one bad experience, and so they don't allow pets. Just know you're fighting an uphill battle with that. First of all, you're ruling out a ton of the potential tenants that could rent your place. And it's also like with how easy it is to get these emotional support animal letters, if you can just get a doctor to say, yeah, you need that cat or whatever, then you can't charge any pet fees or any extra deposits or anything like that. So you're almost better off just being friendly to it, trying to make what you can from it, and live with it because it's Colorado and everybody has pets. So.
What about multiple pets? Does that have a multiplier effect on pet rent? So if I have 3 dogs, it can be $35.
That was our understanding of it, and kind of in practice what we did.
Yeah. Okay. And then pop quiz here for everyone: is a service animal a pet?
No.
I learned that lesson years ago. That I was like, oh, I'm hiring a property manager. That was my.
Yeah, that's kind of the attorneys will all say, just take out the word pet as soon as it's that, and think of it as like it's not a dog, or you think of it in the same way you'd think of a wheelchair.
Yeah.
You'd never say, well, I can't have the wheelchair in there, or we don't allow those or anything like that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go to the Senate Bill 0184, financial protections. So this all related to screening tenants. So you can no longer use any information over 7 years old. That's as far back as you can go. And income is capped at 2 times the rent. So there's a big carve out for subsidized rent and all that. So they wanted to, that kind of closes this loophole of people saying they don't take Section 8 essentially because the tenant doesn't make 2 times the stated rent amount. But this was a big change, right? Like almost everywhere you went, it was 3 times. And that was what you found on every, landlord tip site and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so now it was just hard line here at 2 times the rent.
Has that changed anything like from a practical standpoint as far as like, more late payments or more evictions just because of like it's a tighter income to rent ratio? Have you noticed any like correlations with that?
I think I think it was just kind of, well, we got to be more diligent on everything else and maybe tighten up credit requirements a little bit, that kind of thing. I can't say that like in the last year we've seen a huge uptick in evictions or late payments.
Probably also not old enough for enough data to really come out yet either, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, credit cannot be a factor for income qualifying subsidized applicants. So we can no longer say if you don't meet our credit score, as a Section 8 tenant, then you're declined there. And security deposit was limited to 2 times the rent. So I think sometimes that one, there were people who just knew they had terrible credit and didn't meet anything, but were willing to put up a big deposit. Now we have to say no on that. And that's something I'd even say, like some of these things you may get a tester who's just asking things like that to see if they can catch you saying the wrong thing. So
what do you mean by a tester?
Like someone from HUD who is trying to find that you're, skirting the rules and you have a possible issue ahead of you if you say
So
the
there
wrong
are
thing.
people that just go out there and start the application process and start talking with the landlord to see if you're compliant.
Yeah, we've yet to have like the horror story with that, but certainly some of my peers have, and it can turn into a huge nightmare. So,
Wow.
all right. So another tip here, just wanted to talk a little bit on your vacant properties and getting things filled. So this is a rule we found to be really helpful in our leasing process. So when you get to 10 days on the market, your property should have had at least 3 showings resulting in an application, and also 3 applications leading to a signed lease. So if you're not seeing that, it might be time to adjust the rent. And yeah, just remember, a vacant property generates no income. Essential to stay competitive there. We have this line we sometimes say of no one knows the rental market better than a prospective tenant. And I mean, they're the ones ready to put their money on the line. They're out there looking at multiple places. Yet it's so easy as the landlord to take their feedback as an insult or dismiss it, say they don't know what they're talking about. But if you can be humble enough to really listen to that, oftentimes you can quickly find if you're overpriced, if you'll listen. But yeah, that's a good rule of thumb there. All right, next we've got the House Bill 1095 prohibited provisions. So this all went through what you can't put in your lease. You can't waive a jury trial. You can't have one-way fee shifting clauses that basically say, well, I'm not paying it if you win, but you're paying it if I win, kind of thing. This was a big one that virtually every lease I saw up until this bill tried to say every fee, every possible thing you might charge was now, they would try to then like say it's rent, right? And so then you could evict for it, all of that. This really put a stop to that, and immediately like all the leases needed to totally flip on that, where it was actually problematic to try to call something rent. And so it was very specific with what's the base rent and then what's a fee on top of that, and making sure that's referred to as a fee throughout.
So you can evict for non-rent payment, but you can't evict for not paying fees.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. This also put a limit on a markup of third-party fees. So this is 2% of the fee, or a $10 upcharge. And so it's whichever is greater. So it would have to be like a $500 bill for 2% to start exceeding $10. I don't know what you're passing through to your tenant that's more than $500 a month. Maybe it's an annual thing or something. But essentially you can't now like, okay, I'm going to keep the water in my name and add $20 to it every time I pass it through for my administration of it. It's capped at that. Easy solution here is make sure you've got an updated lease. All the local real estate attorneys will kind of sell you a template lease for a couple $100, and it just makes sense because all of this kind of stuff is what's been updated since this bill came through. All right. So portable screening report. This was one that certainly caused some hysteria among my peers of basically it allows a tenant to bring a screening report to you that they got from somewhere else, and then you can't charge them a application fee. So there were some stipulations. It has to be a report from the last 30 days. It has to come from a consumer reporting agency or a compliant third party. So that could be like another landlord. And it can't require a cost to the landlord to like access it. So, so you have to, this is a big one too for everybody. I'm pretty sure this one didn't have the carve out for like the small landlord, but you need something in your rental listing that says you can bring a portable screening report at no charge, or at, and not be charged for the application fee.
So it has to be in the listing on the listing.
Yeah, on Zillow or whatever. Yep. You also cannot accept more than one application fee at a time. So gone are those days where you just take a bunch of applications and then screen them all and kind of pick the best tenant. Zillow applications are acceptable. So I'm sure some of you have experienced this, but Zillow kind of had a thing where you can apply and then basically just with a click of a button, you're sending off that application to a bunch of different properties you're interested in. It almost like this had the same effect if those of you who like hire people, of now you get people who on LinkedIn like apply for a job and there's just no friction to it, right? It doesn't cost them anything. So yeah, you'll follow up with somebody who applied to a job and they say, wait, which one is this? Who are you? And you're like, applying to something used to mean something. So it can be kind of frustrating, right? You almost have to shift on that Zillow thing in particular. You have to shift to like seeing an application. It's more just like an inquiry or something.
So almost just it's a lead almost, right?
Yeah. Here. One thing I just say here, if this has been something that all of us were geared up to like see a huge shift in this and all that. And when in our office and when I ask around, like these are very rare. We're seeing them occasionally. A tenant will ask about it. Sometimes they'll even like submit something, but it's incomplete. And then we're trying to follow up like, no, we still need X, Y, or Z. So it just hasn't come up a lot for us. If we have something where the application's not quite what we're looking for, and I don't know, we're just getting vibes that it feels a little weird, or the tenant's being kind of pushy. Sometimes we'll just say, hey, just fill out our application and we'll waive the fee, or we'll refund you right away on that so that we have what we want, but they got around the fee for it. So small price to pay, in my opinion, for just not having to deal with a bunch of pushback or issues with this.
Oh yeah, then plus you're staying compliant, right? So yeah, I remember. So it sounds like, because I remember hearing a lot of property managers that this would be a big change, a big headache, and lots of people with this. But sounds like not many residents are bringing it, and it's not really a big headache one way or the other.
I still wouldn't be surprised if something comes up down the road where a company builds this out in a robust way where they're like, hey, you're looking for a rental, pay one application fee, and then they facilitate sending it around. But so far that hasn't presented itself. So
is that a new business idea you're working on?
Maybe. Yeah. This one seems always almost surprising to us because there's always this narrative in a lot of these bills that like application fees are just this like revenue source for property managers. And I'm sure there's some out there who found some way to just like make that a little cash cow. But by and large, like that's not the game any of us have been in, of seeing that as this huge upside. So it hasn't been a huge shift to get compliant with this.
Yeah, let's so I wanted to stick this slide in here because I think it was earlier this year, end of last year, you guys launched this podcast. I might be wrong on my launch date.
Late last year.
Late last year, yeah. But the Denver Landlords Digest. So I mean, a local podcast geared towards local news, local property management stuff. I got the privilege of being on there, I think back in January, February. And I like it because it's hyper local and hyper niche focused. So if you guys are looking for a new local podcast, get more information, and really from like the landlords and property management perspective, this is a great podcast to plug in. So there's a QR code you guys can scan with your phone if you're at your computer, and we will drop a link into the chat here. Or if they just go Google Denver Landlords Digest, it's on all the major apps, right?
Yep. Yeah, easy to find.
And then you were telling me there is a new episode coming out tomorrow, and I forget the topic you said, but it was relevant to our podcast today.
Yeah, so it's on filling vacancies, and just a lot of creative ideas of if you're struggling to get something rented. A lot of different ways you can work on drumming up activity and that kind of thing, make your property more appealing. So that drops tomorrow. That's the newsletter is the Denver Landlords Digest. The podcast always drops the same day with it. So look out for that and get signed up.
Awesome.
All right, let's jump into 2024.
Oh, that was only 2023 we got through?
Yeah.
All right. So I know 2024 by volume had more bills passed, overall. Do you have a gut reaction? Did one bring more like friction or compliance headaches to landlords?
There's two this year that are a huge shift.
So 2024 might be the bigger compliance year.
Yeah, for sure. Like we definitely spent more time with our attorneys looking at different policies. Yeah, redoing operations on things. It was a bigger lift this year than last year. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we'll jump in 2024. Right. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so this is one that it's very complex and almost unreadable. Like if you can pull all these up at the legislative site. This one is so complicated. It's basically rewriting the warranty of habitability for Colorado and all these requirements around it. But because it's updating something that was in existence previous, so much of the bill is like changing definitions and all this, but it doesn't really make sense in the context as you read it. So yeah, it's just a very, very difficult one that takes some time to figure out, how it applies. Essentially, it's laying out these timelines for responding to things. So maintenance requests related to habitability issues, which habitability issues, this was expanded as part of a bill last year. So they kind of defined it as, maintenance issues impacting life, health, or safety of a tenant. Really hard to kind of quantify what exactly that means. What does it mean to impact their life? I don't know. But these require a response within 24 hours. So this response must include your intention to repair, an estimate of when the repair will begin and be completed. Tenants, these requests can come in any way they choose to inform us. So it could be verbally, text, email, whatever. So no longer, you may have a clause in your lease that says maintenance requests have to be put in writing or sent to this email address or whatever. Just know that's not enforceable. You can't use that as a defense that like, well, they didn't tell me the right way.
I'm not a big fan of either side, the verbal stuff that just I said that. Well, that he said, she said type situation.
Absolutely. It's tricky. Containment must occur within 72 hours. So if there's some kind of leak.
What does that mean, containment?
So basically, if you have a leak or an ongoing thing that's like, it has to be kind of mitigated within, or I don't know. That's a good question. Some kind of, you have to have, at least I think to be defensible here, show a real effort to stop the issue within 72 hours.
And so with the response in 24 hours, I'm assuming that doesn't like a automated email reply or automated message back probably doesn't comply, because it sounds like the response has to have acknowledgement of the repair and the estimated beginning completion time. So an out of office type reply is not going to cut it.
Yeah, that's not going to fly for sure. I think there has to. So we put together a template that includes like language around some of this and all that. We'd be happy to share that too. Again, it's not legal advice or anything, but just something we utilize. So maybe we could put an email address in there or something if people want to request that, or is there some easy way to follow up?
Yeah. What's the best email address someone can email just to grab this or some other
Just do info@keyrenterdenver.com.
Okay. We'll drop info@keyrenterdenver.com. And of course, if you guys can ever find it, just email me or some of the team, and we'll connect it. Connect you to the team over at Keyrenter Denver. Cool. And Jewel just dropped in the chat box on there.
Perfect.
So I guess do you guys have just 7-day-a-week support coverage to like handle responses and issues like this?
Yep.
Okay. Did this rule change anything in your operations? Like, was there, because I could see this being potentially a big operational shift or operational headache.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was just, part of it was just training. Like everybody needs to understand this stuff, understand where the pitfalls are, that kind of thing. I mean, it's not like we were regularly in the habit of not responding in 24 hours to something. I mean, that's typically we're sooner than that, like getting on it and assigning a vendor and that kind of stuff. But yeah, one of the big things is we developed this new protocol of how we respond and what's included in there, kind of thing.
That makes sense.
So this also included repairs interfering with life, health, or safety must be completed within 7 days. So you're on the clock if it's something like that.
So what if a self-managing landlord is on a cruise in the Bahamas? It's a 7-day cruise. Day 2 out there, one of the residents in their duplex in Denver emails them about an issue, and the landlord doesn't get it until they're back with internet 5 days later.
Yeah, I mean, you're potentially in a problematic spot. I mean, by and large, this is not going to, like, most tenants are not going to be like demanding these timelines and and giving you all kinds of problems about it. I would say if you're going to be on a cruise for 7 days, you should probably find some kind of backup. Make sure you've notified your tenant of someone else to contact and that they know what to do. That kind of thing. I think more so than ever, it's important to be
proactive on communication with your
and make sure. Yeah, proactive on communication. And I'd even say, I think it's in the next slide that I talk about this, but I could say it here. Like this is like, keep a really good relationship with your tenant. They need to know that you're going to be there. You're going to, like, if they start getting real disgruntled, this just is so empowering to that, right? That they can give you all kinds of problems. So I think, just prioritizing that like positive relationship, that, professional. It doesn't mean you have to be like great friends with your tenant. It's just like, hey, we're going to be really responsive. I understand the job I have to do here to maintain the premises for you, and jump on repairs right away and take your concerns seriously.
So good customer service.
Yeah, more important than ever, I'd say.
A couple or question here from I think it's Scott in there. What if you can't get a contractor in 7 days?
So we'll go into that in the next slide, but all of a sudden it becomes required you're putting somebody up in a hotel, essentially.
Okay.
I mean, there's going to be times that there's just, if your house burns or something, you can't get that repaired in 7 days. So it's kind of a completed within 7 days, but then also these other things that are layered in, and ultimately the fallout here is it's going to give the tenant the ability to terminate the lease and immediately get their security deposit back and some things like that. It's going to just start giving them some options.
Okay.
It's not like you're going to jail if it's not done in 7 days. Like, you've got a little bit of time in there. Okay, there's this 505 list too that talks about habitability. So again, just Google Colorado 505 list, I think is probably sufficient. And you'll get a link, and it's like this 2-page document that talks about all the requirements of a landlord. Be familiar with those, and they're kind of the less urgent things. But things like, doors and windows all need a working lock, and functional kind of things like that. All right, so here we get into the part where it defines all these alternate housing, how this works. So this gets kind of tricky because there was some legislation in the past that had hotel kind of alternate accommodation language in it and that kind of thing. But this says the unit has to have the same number of bedrooms. So there's not really going to be a 4-bedroom hotel likely, or it's either going to be, you got to get 4 hotel rooms or find an Airbnb with 4 bedrooms or something like that. If you're expecting that it's more than 48 hours, they're going to be displaced and you're having to rehouse them for that. Then the property they're in has to have a fridge, freezer, and a range and stove. So that's like where it's not kind of the same as just putting them in a quick hotel. You might need to find a extended stay option or Airbnb or that kind of thing. And you're also required to pay a per diem. So this is based on the Colorado State employee per diem for interstate travel.
So the landlord has to pay the resident a per diem.
Mm-hmm.
Is it actually like a cash per diem, or is that just, hey, I reduce your rent in the future? Or do you know? I know
there's something here. Did I put it in there? I think it's in advance. I think this actually has to be fronted.
Okay. So if something happens in my house, I have to put you in a hotel. I have to then also say, hey, here's a check for the $200 or whatever it is in the per diem.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Yeah. I did not realize. I did not know about the per diem aspect of it.
This, to add to that, you may be responsible for relocation costs, including storage, transportation, pet boarding, things like that. So it had this whole thing in there of like, you have to find something within 5 miles, except if nothing's available in 5 miles. Then you have to find something within 10 miles, except if nothing's available within 10 miles. So it read a little funny to me, but it's, at some point too, it's like, well, now they're going to be driving a little further. So you have to reimburse for driving costs or something like that. So, and then documentation is required that shows your compliance with habitability. So this is, again, you got to really make sure you're handling this properly and documenting it so that you can defend that we're proactive here.
Is that like a general statement, or are you just saying, hey, when something happens, make sure you have it properly documented? So there was a, something, a flood happened, like you're saying, have it documented like per incident.
I would even say like, I can't speak exactly to how that language was in there. I don't remember it right now, but my sense is like you should probably be keeping like a timeline and a log of what you heard when and when the update was provided, and something that kind of like keeps this all straight, right? Because there's a lot of moving parts and different things going on here. And you know how complicated a repair can get when it's something you don't always know exactly what's going wrong or where that source of the leak is or that kind of thing. So there might be multiple vendors and multiple communications with the tenants about that kind of thing.
So keep a good paper trail.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is something new too. Like AC has never been part of the warranty of habitability in Colorado. And it's still not in a general sense, unless it was something that was listed in the lease agreement. And this, I think any appliance included in the lease agreement also may apply. So all of a sudden they're saying it's uninhabitable if some appliance that was referenced is no longer working.
So dishwasher, dryer, washer, refrigerator, anything like that?
That's our understanding. We put may apply because that was kind of the attorney was, it wasn't explicit in there, but it seemed that was kind of their interpretation of it.
All right. So as with a lot of laws, there's some still gray area and not clarity on certain things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I've got one more slide on this. I wanted to recap some of our operational changes. Again, I said this before, but you have to prioritize the tenant experience. Like I would rather miss something in there and miss a date, miss a deadline and that kind of thing, but have a good relationship with the tenant and they understand you're doing what you can and all that. Then you did it all right, but the tenant's like ready to go to war with you, right? Like this, trying to prove that you were in compliance with all this, I think could be a huge burden. Again, this template message outlining rights and responsibilities. So that was something part of what we're giving the tenant is just, here's what we're complying with in this process, which is, I know this is a hard thing for sometimes of like, why is it my obligation? Like now when you post a demand for rent, you have to include like the paperwork of their rights and all that. Same kind of thing here. So you have to make available this information to the tenant. All right, let's get on to the next one that was a big deal this year. So this is House Bill 1098, cause required for eviction. I think the thing here that just like is so hard to wrap your head around if you've been around rental property forever is it's redefining an eviction. We've never called it an eviction when you didn't renew a tenant's lease, but now it shifts that in the early, wording of the bill. And then the rest of the time it keeps referring back to this eviction that you have to like rethink what an eviction is. Okay, so it allows the landlord to terminate or evict the tenant at the end of the lease, so not provide a renewal, only under the following circumstances. So if the tenant was in the property less than 12 months and the lease is up, then this doesn't apply. If you're going to demolish the property, if you're going to renovate the property, both of these, I would just say it like you do have to provide some documentation to the tenant on like what it is you're doing. So I don't know how specific that needs to be, but I wouldn't think it's a good idea to say, hey, I'm going to renovate the property. And then like, you change out a toilet or something and then relist the property 3 days later. If you're reoccupying the property, I think it carves out for you or a family member moving in, selling the property. And if the tenant refuses to sign a reasonable lease renewal. So the big question here that always comes up is like, well, what's reasonable?
It's a lawyer's favorite word.
I know,
reasonable.
Right? Yeah. So again, like we talked about with the whole, like all your tenants with pets have $500 more in deposit. Like, I don't think it's going to be a good look if you double the rent in your renewal offer to a tenant and everybody else got a 5% increase or something. So, yeah, I don't think this is like a loophole, but yeah, like you can offer in good faith a new lease, and if they don't sign it, then that's a way to get out. Also, if they've paid late 3 or more times, and this is one that like I've heard differing opinions from different attorneys. Some think that when they define a late payment here, it's like they have to have not paid the rent on time, you posted a notice, and then that demand, which oftentimes now is 30 days for the CARES Act covered properties, has to expire. They still haven't paid the rent. Okay, that's one late payment, but then they cured it, before it actually got to eviction or whatever. So some attorneys, that would be their interpretation. I've heard others say, no, I think that I would go to court saying that late is late. It's not, as long as if they cured after that notice was posted, that would be late. So, all right. So this is a huge operational pain for us too. So 2 attempts are required before posting if no one is home on the first. So in the olden days, a lot of us, I think, would go out to the property and just post a notice. You wouldn't even knock, right? And it did say on there, I've made diligent attempts to serve personally, but yeah, then you would just tape that to the door and be done. But this, now you have to go out one time. If nobody answers the door and there's nobody to serve, then you have to go back a second day and try again. Then on that second attempt, you can post it on the door. But yeah, it's just a lot of these, especially if we're trying to do these during the day, you just get people who aren't home or won't answer the door. So you're stuck going out a separate day. The pay or vacate date must reflect the day of service. So this also just adds a little bit of complexity, because if you go out that first day and can't serve, just know, like, if you kind of timed everything on that form for 30 days or whatever from that date, you need to update that before you go make your second attempt, because that second attempt will be when that clock starts.
Okay.
So the maybe the conservative thing here to do is just print up the notice reflecting the 30 days from the second day, and then you don't have to redo it. Yeah, just a reminder, this went to the Supreme Court in Colorado, but basically they said this CARES Act that was enacted during COVID still applied to properties with a federally backed loan, that instead of a 10-day notice, it needs to be a 30-day notice. And so, yeah, that's, most of you, if you have a 30-year fix, that's going to be a federally covered property. Another thing, demands must be in the tenant's primary language. So another tricky part of this is just, making sure you have this translated in their language. We, on this one, I'll cover that in just a second. Also, a 90-day notice is required for the non-renewal of the lease. So that's a long way out. Again, that's like, if you miss that, basically how we've heard it explained is, you then have to, let's say it's now only 30 days out from the lease end and you didn't do this and the tenant didn't sign a renewal. If the tenant pushes and isn't willing to move out, like, you have to, from the time you give a notice, like, continue the current lease terms for until that 90 days is up, and then they would have to move out. All right, so I wanted to go through some of the operational changes we made for this. So initial lease term, we're doing under a year, and that kind of gives you, then you don't have to comply with any of this at that first renewal option.
So like 11 months, or are you doing like 11 months and 29 days?
I think we're doing closer to like 11 months and 25 days or something like that.
Okay.
So pretty close to it. But we start our lease renewal process now 150 days out before expiration, just to, it seems crazy, right? The tenant's like, I just moved in.
That's
but
halfway through.
Yeah.
What was your days out before?
We were, I don't know. That's a good question. I think it went from like 100 and maybe 105 or something.
Okay.
Like, so we were already starting it early, and keep in mind,
105 is earlier than a lot of like landlords and other property managers I know.
If you're
a lot are like 60, 90.
Sometimes we're just dealing with more complexity because we have a client who may be undecided on what they want to do with the property, or they're not super responsive right away and stuff. So some of this is building in time that wouldn't be the case if you're a self-managing landlord or something. But we just want to make sure, like, we're not pushing up against that deadline and haven't given that notice of non-renewal. Our lease still requires 60-day notice from the tenant. Basically, we made a choice here to just, rather than like revamp the whole lease right now and change it all to 90 days, we're saying 60 days. There's some risk there that a tenant, says, no, you owe me 90, and we'd have to basically go month to month or not month to month, but we'd have to extend to the additional 30 days if they push back on that. But Our application now asks the tenant for their primary language, and on existing tenants, the property manager kind of uses discretion if they have some reason to believe it's not English as their primary language, then they'll get some more clarification there before we start the eviction process. But yeah, also it's like if we get somebody who says their primary language is Swahili or something, I guess we'd have some time if we knew things were going south with it to make sure we had the proper translation for these notices. Yeah, like I touched on this, but we're just making 2 attempts to post notices, and this is all notices, not just the notice of non-renewal. So it could be any, rents late, whatever. So this, we have a guy who does a lot of field work for us. And it basically doubled the amount of time he has to spend on these. Yeah, it's kind of a.
What's your note about a portable printer in there?
Oh yeah, we have a portable printer for him just to
in his truck.
Yeah, just to cut down on the time of having to, especially with the updated dates and these kind of requirements.
So you go sit in his laptop, update a date, print off a new one, and then you go. Okay, that's smart.
Yeah. And this again made it clear you can't include any fees on your demand notices, so we're evicting for rent only here.
Okay. So I got a couple questions. You got more slides on 1098?
That's it on that one.
Okay, before we move on, because I know we got a lot of slides in here. So a couple of people asking, does 1098 apply to month-to-month leases? Or does it come back to depending on how long the resident's been in there?
I think
the total occupancy time.
Yeah, this is one too. I don't want to go outside of my lane on speculating and stuff. So it'd be a good question for an attorney. My understanding was, there'd still be a 90-day notice required for not offering a renewal, I guess.
Okay, so check with your attorney on that for the people asking questions out there. Given the possibility of having to house, pay per diem, etc., to your tenants, what, if any, additional insurance coverage would you recommend we get as property rental owners? Thanks.
I don't know of a policy that kind of covers that kind of thing. I don't know. That'd be a good question for an insurance agent.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I think of is I know there's on my landlord policy thing, it's loss of use.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a flood or the house, or the property burns down, they will, cover, rental income to me and do some other services. But I imagine that I don't know if that would apply to warranty of habitability. Yeah. That's going to be an interesting question. If anyone out there, I'm going to make a note to talk to my insurance broker one day about that. If anyone has any ideas or happens to be an insurance broker in the chat, let us know. Another question. What are Brandon's credit thresholds for potential renters? And what are what do you charge for managing a property? So 2 questions here. Credit thresholds and what's your management fee?
This is going to be terrible. I don't know exactly what our credit requirements are. Yeah, I could check with our leasing team on that. And then we charge 9% of the monthly rent if it's just one property. It goes down if there's multiple properties.
Okay. So follow-up question on there. Tony says, with all the added regulations in 23 and 24, has that impacted your management fees and have you changed them?
We haven't yet. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we'll see if we find in the end it's taking us 25% more time and manpower to manage property. That may have come down the road, but at this point we haven't changed anything.
Okay, but right now you're at 9%, but multiple properties.
It goes down to 7.5 is the lowest. For 5+.
Going back up here to the habitability one, what if the unit has no AC? Is AC included in the?
No, so it's only if it was included in the lease. Now it's a habitability issue.
In the lease, hey, this property has a dishwasher, a washing machine.
Yeah, a pretty common that a lease will have some kind of section that says what's included here and a list of appliances and amenities and that kind of thing.
Okay. Earlier, I'm just going back to some few chat messages on here. On any of the properties that you manage, Brandon, Has anyone brought up the safe housing issue?
Not to my knowledge yet.
Okay. Can you share a copy of the slide deck?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah, we'll send out afterwards as well. Oh, does your company, Keyrenter, only do tenant sourcing, like tenant placing, and then the landlord can self-manage?
Yep. So we'll do that for 1 month's rent.
Okay.
And we set up a lease with you to sign with the tenant, collect the initial costs, and then pass it off to you for coordinating move-in.
Okay. Is it 9% plus an annual fee? Is a question for your fees?
Yeah, so we have a $99 annual accounting fee, and then when we place a tenant for a managed property, we charge half a month's rent.
Okay. So 9%, $99 annual accounting fee, and then half month rent when you place a tenant.
Yep.
Okay. Great. I see a couple people in here wanting to get the slide deck. Awesome.
I see that on the, if you want an updated lease, we've worked a ton with Cheddar Sulzer is like the biggest kind of landlord attorney in town. And they have, I think they charge $250 or $300 for it, but they always have a kind of current lease you can just buy from them. And it's, templated. So you got blank fields and all that.
Okay. So what was the name of the law firm again?
Cheddar Sulzer. So TSCHETTER. SULZER.
I'm impressed with your pronunciation, but more impressed with your spelling of it. So obviously you work with them a lot.
Yeah,
I know the firm, but I can never pronounce it, and
they've
to
changed
save
their
my
names
life,
a
I
few
could
times
never.
too.
Yeah, I could never come anywhere near spelling it. But yeah, they're like the. I mean, pretty much every group I know, that's who they use. They seem to be kind of like the de facto.
Yeah, they're the biggest. There's some others that get
Yeah.
used a lot, and we use a different law firm for like writing our leases and some different things. But they're great, and they've tailored their service to work with self-managing landlords and smaller landlords and that kind of thing.
Ooh, all right. Shauna says, I work with Keyrenter and am giving them a glowing endorsement. Thank you, Brandon and team.
Thanks, Shauna.
Can you spell that law firm name again?
Why don't you find? I think their
here. Why don't you type it in there?
Can I type?
Yeah, we'll see.
It's either one of these. Somebody could tell me which one is right.
It'll get you close. See if you can spell and type at the same time.
Yeah, there we go. It's one of those. Try them both, and then somebody respond and say which is right.
Someone says, if I pay cash for a property, do the same eviction rules apply?
Yeah, virtually everything applies except that thing with the 30-day notice period. So
for the CARES Act, right?
So if you paid cash, then your notices only have to be 10 days, but everything else still is the same.
Cool. Awesome. All right, now we got a few minutes left on it. So keep the questions coming in. I also have a couple slides left, Brandon. So
we got through the fun ones though, so it's a little bit better from here. Okay, this is a simple one. So the old rules said if you had a tenant come to you who had a disability and they needed to make a modification to the property, you had to allow it. But they did have to put it back as they found it at their cost upon move out. This just basically undid that last part of it. So you still have to make the allowance that they can make a reasonable modification. But when they move out, it's no longer their requirement that they pay to restore the property. So this is something like I asked around the team and has not come up a lot. Tenants asking for reasonable modifications. So it's just not like a big thing we've dealt with. And I'm sure there's a scenario out there where a tenant puts a lift in your property or something, and it's like, this is not really very rentable, or it looks really bad or something like that. But I think for the most part, this is just going to be ramps or widening doorways or something like that. That's probably honestly like a benefit to your property. And
I mean, some of those, it sounds like most of those are going to be an improvement.
Yeah, totally. An improvement. But basically, it's going to be up to you as the landlord to decide when the tenant leaves if it's worth putting it back or leaving it. And it could enhance your rental appeal to disabled tenants. So, not a ton there, but just something to be aware of. Okay, so there were these two bills on accessory dwelling units. These are kind of all the rhetoric around it was that this is aimed at the Colorado housing shortages. And keep in mind, these laws, like the capitals here in Denver and bulk of the population, but there are plenty of these things that get proposed and are with the thought of like a lot of other communities out there, right? So Some of this I think definitely seemed like it was trying to target like these mountain communities that have like extreme housing shortage,
Yeah.
especially for the workforce and that kind of thing. So that was some of what I was getting, seemed to be picking up in the language of them. But so this House Bill 1152 mandates ADUs as use by right in single family zones. I think what that means is just you can use it if you have it. There's no like the municipality can no longer say like they are not allowed in this single family zone, or the HOA or anything below that. So it also allocated up to $8 million that can be used by these municipalities for however they see fit to encourage these or offer, I don't know, maybe they'd get some template blueprints for them or that kind of thing. And then the 154 bans any restrictive design or dimension standards for ADUs. So that was something I guess was prohibitive to some of these. So I don't know if this maybe opens up more room for these super micro units or something on single family properties. I don't know. This one, it's really hard to say what's going to be created here. I think there's a possibility that there's some opportunity to expand the rent value of a property and the numbers might make sense. Chris, you had made a comment to me that you've not seen these make much sense. So.
Yeah, I mean, two things I've noticed. I've never seen, ADUs are very, they're very sexy, very attractive from, all, from affordable housing, from landlords, all people say, hey, put another unit on there. The problem is like from a pure financial standpoint, I've never seen the numbers pencil out. More often than not, because financing is very tricky, and then you're building a tiny home, which usually has exorbitant, much higher cost, and then financing is tricky, and then usually poor, rent to price ratios. And then I know there's been a lot of zoning overlays and changes in laws which are trying to get more ADUs in the pipeline. I forget the exact number, but like every year, there's still less like 100 ADUs built every year.
Oh wow!
And and maybe that's changed last year or so. I'm kind of giving you memory. Don't quote me on this stuff, factually, but just like for the amount of impact it has, it's just a drop in the bucket in terms of like having any type of move the needle on creating more housing or more affordable housing. So like I love it. I'm all for it. I just tell people like keep your eye on there, and I think over years and years it'll play out. But I don't see any like dramatic changes.
Sure.
If anyone out there is an ADU expert, come give better
know.
information or tell me if I'm wrong. But as I kind of dove in this a lot years ago, and just I didn't see a lot of upside.
Yeah, and maybe I don't know if $8 million is enough to kind of stimulate some better financing for these or something. I don't know. It's not a lot of money, but maybe we'll see something come out of this that makes a difference. Okay, so this was another one related to zoning. So there's two bills I'm going to reference here. One's about transit-oriented communities, and then also parking requirements. So the goal of 1313 was to add transit-oriented housing. Again, it seems like this isn't like related to Denver as much as it is like a lot of these. I think it might have even specified like any community with 10,000 or more people, this type of public transit. But yeah, they want this higher density, this growing density right around transit oriented housing, or transit oriented areas. So the target is 40 units per acre, which didn't mean a lot to me before this, but I guess that's like a typical kind of density for more urban areas. And then 1313 allocates 35 million for infrastructure grants in transit areas. So a lot of times if you have like a main street with a bus line or whatever, and maybe right now there's a bunch of single family around it, there's a certain upgrade that needs to happen if you're going to start building apartments there and that kind of thing. So this gives the communities some money to upgrade, I don't know, water and sewer and roads and whatever it might be there. So the 1304 reduces the parking requirements for multifamily developments near transit. So this, I know that sometimes the barrier to building certain developments is just the parking requirement, especially like in urban areas with very expensive land.
And for many deals being killed because they're going to get the right parking requirements.
Yeah. So again, it's like none of this stuff I think will immediately have this huge impact, or we're not seeing like certain property values spike because of the potential here. I think that, everyone involved in this is going to kind of wait and see what happens. But yeah, just wanted to highlight these as something to keep an eye on, and maybe there will become some opportunity for investment there.
Cool.
All right.
Well, this kind of wraps up the webinar. I know we are just a couple minutes past the hour, but I mean, first, Brandon, great job in the presentation. Very, very concise and great explanation of simplifying and really handing out some of the main things to watch for. And appreciate putting some tips in there as well, help landlords navigate it, and also maximize their net operating income as well. Great reminder that if you guys want to go out there and get a free rental analysis, or explore having a property manager come take over your portfolio, or you don't want to deal with all the new compliance stuff, reach out to Keyrenter. And should they email info@Keyrenter Denver?
Oh,
perfect.
Here's some contact info.
So yeah, and we'll post all this as well, but you can go to their website, call them, or email and get in touch for the free rental analysis. And if you guys use Keyrenter, a free month's worth of rent. And one thing is like about Brandon as well, he's been a landlord himself. He also always believes in adding value to relationships and kind of give you like, hey, here are other ways to optimize your portfolio on, hey, doing this in rent, or maybe consider moving this property here. Like, they're just a great resource. I would absolutely recommend you connect with him and his team to get value in your rental property. And they do that because that's how they know they win clients to their book of business. So Brandon, thank you so much, man.
Absolutely.
Any final tips or anything that you want to mention before we wrap up? I know this was a lot. I got everything covered from my checkbox. I think we covered all the questions as well, but wanted to make sure you had no outstanding tips.
There was one question on the $8 million allocation. I don't know. My understanding is it's not necessarily money that's going to go directly to people building ADUs. It would more be available to municipalities. Like, maybe they could set up a grant. I don't know. That would get exhausted pretty quick if they're actually like funding the ADUs. But I think it's just helping. Maybe some small community needs to add a staff member who just deals with processing ADU permits, and I don't know, that kind of thing. So that was my understanding, is it's like money that would go to the municipalities.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. It's not going to subsidize someone building ADU, like an investor on this call. Cool. Awesome, everyone. Well, if you guys have any questions, reach out. Make sure to reach out to Brandon and his team at Keyrenter. As you can tell, they're a great resource. They're a great property manager. So I highly recommend you get in touch. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.